These debaters have demonstrated excellence throughout the tournament, and today they represent the very best of what global debate has to offer. Please give them a strong round of applause. Now, to officially open the round, we invite the adjudication team to present the motion for the final debate.
Fantastic. We're all very excited for what will be a wonderful final. And it's going to be a thrilling round that I'm sure everyone will enjoy. The motion for today's final has an info slide. It reads, Seriti is a communitarian philosophy found in the Setswana, Sesotho, and Sepedi cultures. According to this philosophy, a person's moral, spiritual, and social standing, their Seriti, is bestowed upon them by their ancestors, living and dead. Individuals who abide by this philosophy prioritize living in line with the values and desires articulated by their ancestors and maintain a relationship with them by not ignoring, disrespecting, or dishonoring them. The motion for today's final reads, this House prefers a world with a strong belief in Seriti. Let's give another warm round of applause for the two finalist teams.
Now, with the motion now announced, we begin the debate. We invite both teams to present their cases with clarity, rigor, and respect. Best of luck to both teams.
Thank you very much. Welcome to the grand finals. Let's start with introductions. Let's do introductions. I'm Mubarak. Let's do introductions of our esteemed judging panel. If you could kindly give a warm round of applause one by one, starting from my left, from Canada, we have Jason. He fought really hard to be on this panel. Next to Jason, from Zimbabwe, we have Muku. From Singapore, we have Hao Tian. From Slovenia, we have Rea. From Germany, we have Tarun. From Greece, we have Alexia. From Poland, we have Claudia. And last but not least, representing Latin America, from Peru, we have Mauricio. Amazing. Before we start the debate, I know we have clapped for all the debaters as a collective, but I think it would also be nice if we recognize them as individuals. Firstly, recognizing the debaters on stage for Team Proposition, we have Veda. Going second in reply will be Avni. And going third will be Uday. We would also like to recognize the two speakers who are not speaking this round. Firstly, Manveer. And Arnav. For the opposition, speaking first is Lucas. Speaking second is Maya. And third speaker will be Alice. The two speakers who are not speaking this round, firstly we have Harry. And finally, we also have Victoria. With that out of the way, if you haven't seen the info slide yet, I would suggest reading it if you want to follow this round. Without further ado, to begin the grand finals of the World Schools Debate Championships, where we have the first proposition speaker here.
Before I begin, that's a set of people that Team India would like to thank. First of all, our coaches, and not just those who are with us right now, but those who've helped us across our debating careers. Chris, Sriram, Lucia, Oscar, Ananya, DJ, Namita, and Uzair for me. We're so grateful for you guys, and we would not be here without your support. Second, I'd like to thank the Indian Schools Debating Society, ISDS, for introducing me to debate. Varshin and Atul, I'm so indebted to you guys and forever grateful. I would not be debating without you. Last but not the least, we'd like to thank the people back at home, our families, our schools, friends, everyone who's been there, and of course, my lovely teammates, Avni, Uday, Arnav, and Manny, and our team judge Parth, who really wanted a special shout out. When you die, your life flashes before you for 7 minutes. In these minutes, Team India does not want you to think of how many figures were on your paycheck, or how many friends came to visit you in the hospital, or what your speaker rank at WSDC was. What we want you to remember is your community, that you lived a life of models, a life that generations before you would be proud of, and a life that leaves behind a remnant of the values you cared about. What is our stance in this debate? We prefer a world where there is a strong belief in Seriti, and we ask the panel to broaden your minds because this is a different world. We think Seriti looks like having a unique form of respect and appreciation for your ancestors, the generations before you. And this is important because Seriti is not about what your grandfather wanted from you, it's about the generations before, the values they upheld. It looks like if your ancestors prioritized honesty, that's the one value you wish to carry on to your children. That if your ancestors valued community, you wouldn't move out, that you'd stay within the joint family and maintain relationships with your relatives, for example. How then is this conceptualized on our side of the house? We think it's largely via memory. So the stories your grandparents have told you, the ones that you then tell on to your grandchildren. And that is why, because these are values, they tend to adapt with context as these generations move forward. So community back then, no thank you, could have meant like marrying someone within your own community, but now it's different. It looks like, for example, not moving out as early. But secondly, because these are values, they tend to be more vague. They're not as specific. This is not about the job that you're choosing, but rather they have to apply to all generations, and that means it's about values such as honesty, kindness, community, to take care of your elderly. Overall then, the choices you make on our side are guided by your ancestors, that you feel validated when you stick to their vision, that you honor their wishes, that you respect them even when they're gone. And I want to note, this debate is about where you derive your spiritual, moral, and social standing from. We prefer Seriti. Team Australia then has to defend the status quo, where it's capitalism that tells you how much money you have, or your appearance, or your race, and other fleeting ideas, where you're primarily taking away your social standing from. That being said, two arguments from Team India in the speech. First, on why Seriti rewards people a unique source of meaning. Second, on why we're able to revive communal values and support systems on our side of the house. First argument then, on why Seriti rewards people a unique source of meaning. There are two parts to this argument. The first is that Seriti ensures meaning for current generations. Second, we'll show you why Seriti gives the elderly meaning in the last few years. Firstly then, let's talk about the current generations. We think that current sources of social standing are fleeting and external. It looks like your source of validation from the money you earn, the job that you're at, the number of friends around you, and what they tell you to begin with. Why is this uniquely harmful? Three structural reasons for this. The first is that a lot of this is completely out of one's control. That is to say, the reason you're succeeding at your job interview is something that is arbitrary. The friends you have or the money you have is often shaped by conditions that are just out of your control. Where you were born, for example, the kind of family you grew up in. But second, a lot of these forms of standing are unattainable. There will always be someone who is richer than you, always someone who is more popular, who is more successful. And in most instances, you can't strive to reach the top when it comes to these other forms of social standing. But third is that these are fleeting. That is to say, you can never continue to be liked for long periods of time. You will not always be successful. There are highs and lows in life, and that is something that is natural. On the comparative then, why is Seriti a far more meaningful way of assessing social standing on our side of the house? Two reasons for this. The first thing is that it's far more personal to you. That is to say, this is your family, your culture, and so you feel far more in line with it, that your great-great-mother really cared towards animals, towards her community, and that means when you're donating to an animal welfare charity, you feel in line with it, you feel as if you have purpose. But second, you can control these kinds of narratives. And I want to note, there is no one telling you on our side that you aren't perfectly in line with your Seriti. That is to say, you determine it yourself, the way in which you're sticking to your ancestors' values. And that means you have the leeway to decide what it looks like. So the way you're finding your social standing or morality is something you're able to control for far more on our side when it's something you can determine on your own.
Point of information.
And I want to weigh this. This is you feeling far more reassured that you're not just a speck in the 8 billion people that are living out there. That when your grandfather told you to be confident, I am confidently speaking on this stage today, and that's something I feel purpose with, value associated with, as opposed to something that is so fleeting on their side. But the second part of this argument deals with how Seriti is uniquely meaningful towards the elderly. That is to say, Seriti gives the elderly a chance to leave behind a part of themselves, i.e. a legacy. And this is important because that is unfair. It happens so suddenly. It happens so unfairly. When your mother passes away at 60, you wish you could be clinging on to her more. On our side then, we give you the ability to care about your values, to ensure that you're leaving something for generations to follow behind. The fact that the things you care about is something that the grandchildren in front of you are going to be following at the same time is something that's going to last for so much longer. There is no other way of controlling the image you leave behind once you're gone. Seriti uniquely gives you the ability to do it on our side. Before I move on to my second argument, I'll take the POI.
Sure. Your social standing is determined by what your ancestors did, which you cannot control. Is that good?
We think that the ancestors, this is not about what your ancestors did, but rather what your ancestors believed in. So things like community, honesty, support systems on our side of the house, and that means you can interpret it in the ways you want. So if your ancestors was very big on honesty or like caring about community, that's something you interpret on our side, you carry on with the legacy, you move forward. It's not like if your grandfather or like your great-grandfather had one specific job, you have to do that on our side. This is not what this debate is about. Second argument then, on why we're able to revive communal values and support systems far better on our side. What do we think the values pushed down actually look like? And we would posit that these are far more community-oriented. And that is because with our ancestors, there were far more closed and tight-knit communities. They had cultural ties, festivals. These were things they prioritized on either side of the house because that is how our ancestors lived in the past. Over time, however, we would posit that we have gotten far more individualistic, and that is for two reasons. The first is due to the pressures of competition and capitalism, that you have to work more and more, that you have to strive to get that promotion, that's the thing that decides your worth. But second is due to increased urbanization, that is to say people flocking to these cities for work, leading to nuclear families that sever these familial ties. It is only then with a strong belief in Seriti that changes this, that makes people far more community-oriented. And the impact of this is twofold. The first thing is that you care far more for the living elderly. This looks like not sending them to old age homes, spending time with them when you're taking off work to ensure you can spend time with them during their last few years. And that it doesn't have to feel like a checklist on a to-do list to spend time with them, that you genuinely enjoy doing them, that you want to learn about the stories they had, the kind of life they lived before you. But the second thing is that you extend far more support towards your family. And that is incredibly important because in the status quo, we lack a lot of support systems. Our friends are constantly changing because there's so much competition. People prioritize their own selves. Families have slowly started to get diluted. It is uniquely Seriti that brings this back, that brings your culture back, that looks like women, for example, when they're dealing with their children, other relatives stepping in, support systems becoming far more important. These are people you can rely on, people you can trust on our side of the house because Seriti ensures that you want to live by these values of community that your ancestors set out for you. And I want to weigh this argument. The reason we are here today is because of our ancestors. The land we live on was once farmed by our ancestors. These were the families that were formed. Our parents, the ones who took care of us throughout, put in a life saving. We then owe a reciprocal obligation to abide by these values to support these parents and generations ahead. For all these reasons, we're incredibly proud to propose on Team India.
Before I begin, Team Australia would like to thank everyone who has made this moment possible. First, to the organizers and the Panamanian government. Your dedication and kind hospitality have made this a fantastic tournament. Second, we are deeply indebted to the Australian debating community, including everyone who has coached us back home and shown us your support while we've been here. We also thank the Australian Debating Federation and the Department of Education for your support. Third, to the friends that we've made here, you guys are super awesome. And to all of our friends and family back home, some of whom who are waking up really early in the morning to watch this live stream, thank you. Lastly, we are so grateful to the adults of Team Australia, to our coaches Tom Non Rutledge, otherwise known as Nundog, and Liv White, otherwise known as Livius, and to our team manager and judge, the mighty Max Thomas. We would have achieved none of this without you guys. Thank you. Unlike what Team India tells you, this isn't just a debate about community or living by values which they are unable to name one and which seem vague and amorphous throughout that entire speech. This theme traps people into living lives that their ancestors wanted them to live. They are shackled to customs and values and traditions that they had no role in shaping. Team Australia's stance is very clear. The dead ought not control the living. You deserve agency of your own life. One thing in setup, the alternative is this world where people's moral, social, and spiritual worth are judged on their own merits and by their contemporary communities, etc. And unlike what this team tells you, these things are not fleeting. People are still able to find meaning under our side of the house, which is something that they are able to opt into rather than being forced upon them, as this team says. What claims are two pieces of extraneous rebuttals before I get into the arguments. The first thing they tell us is the characterization that values are likely to change over time. And I want to observe it's quite bad when Team India tries to dodge their burden at first, because it explicitly says, as the definition of this Seriti thing, that you have to live in line with the values of your ancestors. But secondly, presumably this knifes their own stuff, because presumably if values change over time and people become more individualistic, they obviously lose their benefits on community. Secondly, they tell us, but you become more community-oriented under their side. Yeah, people still love their families. They still have friends and communities they are able to opt into. This team never proved to you why this is something which is a tipping point that accesses more community. Two arguments in the speech. First, why this is incredibly bad for individuals. Secondly, why this inhibits social progress. In the first argument, there are three parts. The first is why this team significantly limits agency and why that is a principal harm. Secondly, on why this team causes extreme anxiety and unhappiness for the vast majority of people in the world. Finally, I'll illustrate a series of practical bad outcomes that this team causes. The first part of this argument will simply prove why this team significantly diminishes people's agency and why this is a massive constraint and imposition on your life. It's because this thing is something that is embedded within your culture. This motion says strongly believe in this sort of thing, and cultures oftentimes self-perpetuate. But secondly, oftentimes this is something that is applied at a young age, and so you're likely to internalize this for the rest of your life, and you cannot opt out. The final thing is people's moral and social standing is incredibly important for people. People crave social worth because it is within our biology, so this is a powerful compulsion on people's lives. The implication of all this is very simple. This philosophy massively limits people's choices to only what their ancestors expect of them and only what their ancestors ultimately value. Why is this incredibly bad? The first, that this is something which is just principally wrong. The analogy I want to draw here is that religious coercion is viewed as wrong. Forcing people to do something or not do something based on the threat of heaven and hell is something which significantly limits people's choice. A similar thing is applied here when you're literally challenging like people's social and self-moral worth. But secondly, only you know your own preferences, only you know yourself best, and you inherit the consequences of your own actions, which means that you ought to try to live your life according to what you believe and not what your ancestors believe and whatever values they try to impose upon you. But secondly, observe that the ability to choose your own values shapes who you fundamentally are as a human. This team robs people of the chance to shape their own identity, to pick and choose the values that they ultimately believe in, and that diminishes your personhood and your humanity. But secondly, observe that this just results in deep amounts of unhappiness. You feel suffocated and trapped by what your ancestors believe, by the values that they uphold, and that's quite bad. I'll take that POI.
In such a capitalistic society where one's success measures their worth, how do you think people judge merit in the status quo?
But people still live under capitalism under your side, right? Like, your entire case is, but we get more community. But it doesn't, why does having your ancestors bestow upon you social and moral worth is something that creates more community is incredibly unclear to me. There are 3 reasons why this causes an extreme amount of anxiety for a lot of people. The first is that oftentimes the desires of yourself and the desires of your ancestors often conflict. That's for the reason that oftentimes people have hidden taboo desires that they ultimately have. Or secondly, you're just influenced by contemporary influences that also shape your desires and shape what you want. And this is incredibly bad when people feel like their social and moral and standing is dependent on what their ancestors believe and they're conflicting against that. Oftentimes that does result in a lot of guilt and anxiety for a lot of people. It probably looks like if you're attracted to someone, but your ancestors value things such as Puritanism, obviously you're going to feel incredibly bad and guilty about yourself. If your ancestors value things such as being frugal or donating a lot, if you want material possessions, obviously that conflicts, obviously that makes you feel incredibly, incredibly awful. But secondly, there is uncertainty in applying values to modern life, because the life of your ancestor looks very different from the contemporary life that you are existing in. These are very different experiences that you are living. Trying to apply those lessons across is something which is incredibly hard, is incredibly stressful. But thirdly, people oftentimes try to live up to their ancestors and they fail, and that's for the reason that ancestors on their side are glorified, they are lionized, all of their imperfections are ones that are wiped clean, and so you are never able to live up to the standards that your ancestors put on you, and that causes a lot of stress and anxiety. It makes people feel like they're inadequate all the time. The impacting of the end of this is very simple. This is about a different world. This team subjects billions upon billions of people to feel shame and awful and inadequate when they're unable to live up to this standard.
Point of information.
The third argument will simply prove why this is practically bad for people. The first part of the first mechanism is that values passed down are simply bad, or at least internalized badly by people who have to internalize them. The first thing is that the values of your ancestors oftentimes are incredibly outdated. They oftentimes are incredibly regressive. Even a generation or 2 generations ago, people were incredibly sexist, they were homophobic, and they were racist. And so they're likely to perpetuate those things across generations, or at least the person who is younger and the child has to internalize this because their moral and social worth depends on this. And it's incredibly bad for you if you are a queer individual and your desires conflict with those of your parents. But secondly, observe that even good values that this team talks about oftentimes are presented without nuance. Oftentimes these things are glorified. Obviously, the most extreme versions of these things are oftentimes presented to a lot of people. And that is incredibly bad because extreme versions of even good values are oftentimes incredibly harmful. Extreme forgiveness is oftentimes bad, especially for women who want to leave relationships which may ultimately be bad for them. But the other reason why this is just practically bad for people is that it gives parents and grandparents disproportional control over your life, because even if you have a bad relationship with them, even if they mistreated you because you were gay or queer or whatever, or did not conform to their standards, you cannot escape and distance and cut ties with them for the reason that your social standing and moral worth with other people diminishes to the extent that you're not seen as following what your parents wanted. The impacting of this is incredibly simple. Team India screws over the most vulnerable people who are queer or women who do not conform to societal standards. These people will suffer the most. Either they are coerced into making choices which are not good for them but are imposed upon them, things such as not entering into a queer relationship because that is something that your parents frowned on. These things are ultimately very unfulfilling and very bad for a lot of people. The second argument will simply prove why this is incredibly bad for social progress. The reason is that people are far less likely to support progress or even having social movements form in the first place, because social movements by nature emerge as a reaction to the regressive customs that this team is forced to glorify. It's much harder to change people's minds if they fear that they are going astray from what their ancestors wanted. People are far less likely to opt into social movements if they feel like they are disobeying the values of their ancestors, and so they fear a lot more. But secondly, people just don't express their dissatisfaction with the status quo because that feels like expressing dissatisfaction with the values that their ancestors placed upon them. The impacting of this is incredibly, incredibly simple. One, there are simply far less resources, far less mobilization that social movements are able to tap into because people are afraid to join them because it feels like conflicting with the values that their ancestors put upon them. Things such as not supporting gay people because you consider yourself to be a traditional family, etc. People are far less likely to donate and join, etc. But secondly, even if this team tries to symmetricize these things by saying conservative values still exist on the outside, comparatively it is just better on the outside if we're able to achieve social change a couple of decades earlier. It means billions of people access better lives, access more fulfilling existences. I'm very proud to oppose.
Team Australia had a very utopic case in this round, that people get to decide their own values, that they live freely. But this is a case that does not cohere with reality. where individuals are shackled by chains of capitalism, a fleeting metrics of their appearance, of their money. That when they look back at what gives them meaning, it is their race, it is how other people judge them, it is the figure on their paycheck. That is what Team India wanted to break free from in this debate. Two questions I'm going to ask. First, where do you get more individual meaning? Second, how does this change the communities we create? After that, I'll forward a third substantive argument on why social change is actually far more likely on our side. First, let's talk about individual meaning. There are two pushes that you hear coming out of opposition. The first push is that this is incredibly limiting to people's choice. First, I think this is an unfair characterization of what this actually looks like, because often the values that you are asked to abide by are not incredibly specific instructions. Think about this. This is upholding the values of your ancestors. Your ancestors, not just your grandparents, but rather ancestors before you, 3 to 4 generations before you. And as a result, it is very rarely likely to be specific things that limit your choice, but rather values that you are told to abide by. Rather, it is things like being kind. It is things like being honest with yourself and honest to others. But second, I think they fail to recognize that this is a radically different world. This is a world where everyone grows up with a strong belief in Seriti. This is a world where people conceptualize their own identity differently. So yes, it is the case that your choice might be constricted by having to abide by your ancestors. No, thank you. But that is not a limitation of choice that people actually think is bad, because people have grown up with it, have not been normalized to it, and is actually something that gives them incredible amounts of value, because they think they are being a good person if they live by the values of their ancestors. They think this is something that makes them far more moral. But finally, I think if they really wanted to make this argument, they needed to be comparative in this debate. That is, they still have alternative expectations that are imposed onto people for their social standing. They still tell people that need to make more money or how they need to look. Those are all alternative expectations that continue to exist on their side for meaning. I'll talk about the implication of that more later. The second thing that they then tell you is there are values that are likely to be regressive. First, I want to note we already preempt this from first. That is, these are values that are incredibly likely to adapt. And this doesn't really cut into our benefits, but rather is just a more realistic conception of the world. If your ancestors tell you that you always need to be honest, you always need to love others, obviously that means different in 2025 than it did in their time. This is something that people themselves are able to recognize. So we don't think you're going to be a raging homophobe today because you recognize that societal contexts have evolved. Rather, what you are being true to is the value that your ancestor told you is really important to them, or the desire that they had. But second, what is their comparative again for this argument? Because if it is the case that your family is one that is incredibly unaccepting, if it is the case that the community you grew up in will never actually accept you, we think on their side, you still face similar restrictions of regression. You still face the same beliefs your parents are homophobic or don't believe that women should have as many rights, and therefore we think that's why a lot of the world is still conservative in the status quo. This doesn't deal with what this actually looks like. What was then our very clear push to you under this clash? This debate was about where you derive your moral, spiritual, and social standing from. And we thought that the alternative sources of meaning that people had were incredibly negative to their own perception, because they were out of your control, because they were incredibly fleeting, because they were incredibly competitive, given the capitalistic world that we see today. There are two assertive lines we hear in response. The first thing they say is, well, people will still be able to find meaning. But what are the alternative values that people are turning to? We think you have to look to the status quo here. It is how much money you make. It is judging people by their appearances, and that is incredibly negative because it is uniquely something that you can never control. But even if could control, it would always be unattainable because there is someone who's always making more money than you, perhaps. But second, they say capitalism still exists. But that's just not good enough, right? Because this is a debate where we fundamentally change how people conceptualize of their identity. This is the belief, this is a world where a strong belief in Seriti is something that is incredibly popular. And we think, therefore, far more people are looking to this as a source of meaning. When you think back about your life, you're thinking about whether you were true to the values you were supposed to be. And that is something that is incredibly rewarding to people. We think individual meaning is great on our side. It is incredibly damaging to their case that they never give you what the alternative is on their side. We tell you that it is likely to be incredibly damaging. It is similarly restricting in choice, but it is one that you cannot personalize because only you get to decide how true you are being to your ancestors and no one does. On their side, all of the metrics they have are ones that society gets to judge you on. Before I move on to the second clash, I'll take a POI, but also if you have a timer, can I borrow that because this has stopped working?
Cool.
Yes.
Oh.
POI.
Why do people have to find meaning from their ancestors? Why can they not find meaning in communities like social movements or clubs that they can willingly opt into?
Great. I'm just going to my community clash. That was lovely. All right. Second clash then on community. We tell you that this world is one that is increasingly individualistic, where people live their lives at the expense of community and therefore are not able to find support systems, are not able to find well-being. Their response is, well, other communities still exist and you can find them. But this is just not good enough. Look at the world we live in. First, this is a world in which you're far more likely to move out for economic opportunities because you don't have the same communal bonds. Far more likely to prioritize your own individual success because that is the counter narrative that tells you to prioritize that. But second, empirically, we have seen things like a rise in nuclear families. We have seen things like being far more individualistic. And even if it is the case that people have some communities, we think that is incredibly different because even then, the way you are judging yourself is by the kind of community you are living in. Maybe you have some fleeting moments of happiness with your family, but most of your time is being spent at work. What we needed then was for you to have control over how you conceptualize of your own community and for you to think that being with my community is something that I'm supposed to do, something that actively increasing your social standing. And I want to weigh this argument very clearly. We think that there are many factors, first, that limit people's choice. The fact that they're living in conditions of poverty or suffering. The fact that they might not have as many resources, that is also incredibly constricting to their life. The one thing that is then able to give people solace is the fact that they're able to live within a community. The fact that they're able to confide in others, then they have more people to rely on around them. But second, even if we take them at their best and assume that this is a norm that is regressive in some instances, will be exclusionary to certain communities, we think those are still people who are able to benefit from the fact that they have closer-knit support systems. They might not turn to everyone in their family, but just having more of a community around you is helpful. Therefore, the benefits of community are universalizable and therefore far more important. I'm now going to forward a third argument for why individuals behave more positively. This will continue taking down their case. Two strands to this argument. First, individuals are far more likely to care about the legacy they leave behind in our world. Right now, the idea of your legacy is incredibly abstract. Who is looking back on their life and thinking about the values you had? Probably not a lot of people because this is not an active norm. A world with Seriti makes this far more concrete because you know that your values will now be carried down generations. Most people then are averse to leaving a legacy of hatred or discrimination behind and therefore are far more willing within their own lives to evaluate the beliefs they have, to try to be a good person who donates to charity because they want to be someone that they can be looked up to. They want to be someone that is an inspiration to the generations after them. And we think, therefore, if they wanted to talk about social change, it is on our side that people are more likely to contribute because they want to leave behind a legacy of positive values that others have to uphold. But second, values that are propagated by Seriti are structurally broad-based. They are not ones that restrict agency. First, this is because often people have multiple ancestors, and therefore, if they are not broad-based, you risk them being contradictory. People are propagating different values, and as a result, you want to default to things like love or things like honesty. But second, people themselves are willing to recognize that society evolves and changes over time. You know that your life is very different from the life of your parents or the life of your grandparents, and therefore you avoid being overtly specific. This is incredibly important because this means there are no values that are incredibly likely to be regressive or incredibly likely to be constricting, but rather are positive values that people are expected to abide by. This means that people are much more likely to do things like be less discriminatory, donate to charity, help out strangers. This is a world in which people are far more likely to be moral. They try to say that even too much of extremely good values is bad, but that's just weird, panel. Like, no one's asking you to go overboard with these values, but rather embrace them more within your lives. So Seriti then is incredibly unique because often being moral is hard. It requires you to be selfless. It requires you to sacrifice. We want people to have an active impetus to this. At the end of the day, we are shaped by our past. We must honor our ancestors.
Thank you very much. May we now have the second opposition speaker. Here.
Every individual in the affirmative team's world spends their one fickle hour on the stage living out as a hollowed out version of themselves. Their own preferences are crushed by the overwhelming weight of ancestral morality, overrun by a communal doctrine of servitude. We wouldn't support a world where people are coerced in supporting one religion, and that's for the reason that even though religion may give you consolation and hope, it is a form of violence we do not cop. We do not support religious coercion. We never support moral coercion, and that is because the most inherent thing to humanity is bodily autonomy. It is agency. I'll do three things in the speech. Firstly, I'll talk about which side is better for individuals. Secondly, I'll talk about communal values and social progress, and then social progress. Firstly, on which side is a unique source of value for individuals. Their first claim is that there are current sources of social standing that are temporary, and that is bad. They give three reasons for this. The first reason is that meaning is out of one's control. But firstly, there are obviously sources of meaning that are not. You do not need money. You do not need privilege to make friends, to make art, because all you need is love and values and qualities you can learn by yourself. You do not need privilege. Those are all in your control. Secondly, I note that people on our side find sources of meaning they can control. That's for the reason that humans are always trying to find sources of meaning. That's why I say artwork is universal across all societies. People can obviously find meaning under their side. People in the status quo have, empirically. Their second reason is that some sources of meaning are unattainable, such as the fact you cannot strive to reach the top. But the problem with this mechanism is that people do not care about unattainable sources of meaning.
Point of information.
It's psychologically less painful to get and value achievable goals, and goals are often born out of a comparative goal, which is better than where you started out. For example, if you were born in a country with low social mobility, then you wouldn't strive to be the CEO. You would strive to go to university and get a good job. If you were born in a country with lots of mobility, then you would strive to be a CEO. Obviously, it is comparative. People do not set unattainable goals for themselves because their families won't, their society won't, they won't because it is psychologically painful. The third thing they say is that meaning is fleeting. But firstly, I note that you often derive satisfaction from many sources of meaning, such as your own value, such as your friends, such as just spending time with yourself, such as reading books. So you usually have some way to find meaning in your life. This is a cherry pick, even if some sources of meaning are temporary. But secondly, I know that there are just many parts of your life. Your family is often permanent. You often do have lifelong interests. You have a job at the very, very least. And you usually have some friends. Maybe some friendships die out over time, but I don't think it's unlikely that all friendships will die at the same time. And we know that when some people start losing some source of meaning, people often rush and urgently replace it. So I think it's very unlikely. What do they say? They say they actually have sources of meaning for two reasons. Firstly, Seriti is personal, so you can feel more aligned. But the problem with this is they had to prove that families and individuals are aligned. And obviously they are not. They have incredibly different experiences, they have incredibly different personalities, and they have incredibly different needs. Even if you want to claim that you have good general values, such as honesty under their side, that still factors in for different personalities. Maybe someone is naturally quite kind, and then when their mum is like, you should be forgiving, then that turns into subservience. Maybe someone is naturally quite assertive, and their dad is like, you should be assertive. Then that turns into bossiness. People have incredibly different personalities from their parents, and that explains why they do internalize this in bad ways, and it certainly isn't personal. Their second reason for why Seriti is personal is that they say that you are in control of these narratives, and therefore you have leeway to decide what it looks like. Firstly, this is such a strong imposition that I would just say you cannot pick and choose, and that's for the reason that if you take a plain English reading of the motion, it says a strong belief, and I would analogize this to God looking over you, to religion, where people do often commit choices that are bad for them because this is an overwhelming philosophy. And importantly, I know that this isn't just listening to your parents and deciding what to pick and choose. The info slide says you cannot dishonor them, you cannot disrespect them, otherwise your relationship is broken. So you can't just pick and choose the parts that are good. You must not contradict anything that they ever say. They're like, no, but values can adapt to context, but this is asserted in status quo bias, and the status quo values have adapted to context. You guys can't claim that. We know that often people do believe values are true and therefore timeless. Homophobia isn't a specific value, but it is something that can be very strong and can actually persist under your side. But secondly, I know that people assume all things are good things under their side. That's for the reason that they think that their ancestors empowered them with this. They think that all of these values are good because this is the main philosophy. And I know that it's often easy to frame bad things as good if you only tell your side. It's often easy to frame violence as being justified. It's often easy to say submissiveness allows you to maintain friendships or allows you to maintain marriages, all of which explain that this is a bad philosophy. And I'd make the general observation that if people can pick and choose, and if there's so much leeway, then they cut through their very benefits of people having good values in the first place. Because someone who is a bad person is unlikely to pick up the good values from their mom or from their grandma because they're like, I can just pick and choose. The next claim they give is that this is good for the elderly, but because they can leave a legacy. The problem with this is that this isn't specific. You can leave a legacy because of you as a good person. A legacy does not come from people following you. It comes from people cherishing you and remembering you. Secondly, many people do not care if they leave a legacy or not. Many people just care about the experiences they have with people. What do we explain? We explain that this is just terrible for the individual. And the first thing I want to do is just symmetricize the fact that people will pick up good values for two reasons. Firstly, we know that there are already strong social messaging applauding good values because they benefit society, such as kindness, such as selflessness. Secondly, I know that you often learn good values because you get rewarded. You figure out through experience that honesty allows you to maintain friendships. You get rewarded by popularity. You get rewarded by feeling good. And the implication of that analysis is that if your ancestors taught you good values that were good, that is symmetric, so their benefits are symmetric. What isn't symmetric is the harms of their bad values, because we explain values are likely to be outdated, values are likely to harm you, and values at the very least are likely to cause you huge amounts of anxiety and huge amounts of uncertainty. They give a few responses. Their first response is this is symmetric because there are social pressures. So for example, your family would be homophobic under either world. Firstly, empirically, this is not a credible claim. Feminism has made phenomenal strides in the last tens of centuries. People have stood out and rebelled against their family. Secondly, the structural reason for this and why we're exclusive is because your relationship to your family is one of the most focal parts of your life, and often your family will still love you under our side. But under
Point
this
of
philosophy,
information.
this necessitates the ending of your familial relationship. You didn't have to have the same values under our side for your family to love you, but you did under their side. Thirdly, we know that often people hide their rebellion from their family under our side, but under their side, you feel internally guilty even if you're hiding it, because you feel like you're severing a connection with your ancestors, so that also stops you, so it isn't symmetric. Before I move on, I'll take a point.
Ancestors cannot come back from the dead and tell you that you aren't living up to them. Why will you interpret this in a way that is so regressive?
Because on your side, you feel like you are dishonoring and disrespecting your ancestors, and it is a universal philosophy. You think that it is something important. In the same way that, say, God or deities you may not ever meet, you still think they are important. You think they are ever present. You think that they are looking over you. Next, on communal values, there are a few problems with this. Firstly, there are already incentives to love your grandparents and love your parents. You love your family. You love spending time with them. You want to make the most of your time with your grandma who might go soon. It is not a checkbox to not spend time with your grandma. But secondly, in the cases that you do not spend time with family on our side, that is fine. Many people do not get along with their relatives who are chosen by chance and not connection with their friends. So that argument was out of the debate. Next, on social progress, they claim that they get more social progress because people care about their legacy being good. I think the problem with this is that people in your world don't want this legacy, and that's for the reason they want to follow their parents' legacies. And that's because people don't know what a good legacy is, right? Like, people don't know that social progress is a good legacy under your world because their legacy and their whole belief system is social conservatism. It's what happened before them. So they do not think that rebellion is a good thing because they think that rebellion is something their grandma would have said no to, it's something their mother would have said no to. So you never explain that premise. Secondly, I know that they actually do not get a lot of social progress. That's for the reason I think people are just likely to have far more inertia in their beliefs. There's likely to be far more social division under their side. That's for the reason that if people change their views over time, if conservative people or regressive people change their views over time, they think that they are letting their ancestors down. They think that they fundamentally cannot do this, which means that it is much, much harder to forward social progress when you cannot actually change people's views because they think that their family will hate them. For those reasons, vote negative.
Thank you very much. May we now have the third proposition speaker here.
I think Team Australia might benefit from a closer read at the motion, because according to the info slide, this is about your social standing and how you view yourself in relation to society. So at the end of the day, it was not enough for second opposition to talk about clubs. It was not enough for them to come up and give flippant responses about the art you view. At the core of it, it was that you assessed your worth and you judged how valuable of a person you were on the basis of how much money you earned, on the basis of how good you looked, on the basis of how many friends you can form. Crucially, second opposition can tell you all they want about other sources of meaning, but they don't engage with the core of the case from Team India, and it loses them the round. There are three things I want to talk about in this speech. First, what are the kinds of values that are passed down by Seriti? Second, which side provides better meaning and improves the self-worth of individuals? And thirdly and finally, on social change. First, let's talk about the kinds of values that are passed down via Seriti, because I think more broadly, this characterization clash makes or breaks the debate for either side.
Point of information.
Because opposition's case down the bench is that Seriti means that ancestors will guide your every single choice, literally every moment of your life. But this simply wasn't realistic, and we gave you reasons down the bench. The first is that ancestors would clearly know that context would change. They would not be aware of the kind of life you would be leading, or that great-grandchildren would be leading, or what the world would look like, and so the values would be broad-based, which means they're not specific guides about specific situations, but rather instructions like honesty, instructions like kindness, which were generally important for people to follow. But secondly and crucially, these are things that are shaped by memory, which is to say, when I remember my grandfather, I remember his one core tenet, kindness. I may not remember his specific on everything, but the one thing that sticks, the one story that keeps getting told again and again, is about a specific value. This has two implications. First, that these are in fact actually broad-based, but second, that the interpretation of these values is uniquely personal. That's to say that you get to decide whether you're in line with these values or not. No one else knows your thoughts. No one else can control your daily actions on a day-to-day basis. It is only you that can interpret these values because you have the most proximate understanding of it. That's why, unlike what second opposition would want you to believe, it is very different from religion, where there's a religious leader and a religious text giving you a strict doctrine to follow. These are broad-based guidelines we want people to personally interpret and live their lives through. The final attack they levy on this is, well, values are broad-based and conflicting. It cuts through our benefits. But this doesn't actually engage with the nuance of the case that we gave you, which is to say, it's not to say that the values are conflicting, rather that individuals have flexibility in how they apply them, but they still follow the broad guidelines as a whole. The implication of all of this analysis is clear. The clash they give you on choice, not really relevant in the round, because we actually think that people still do have significant degrees of flexibility as long as they stay within the broad guidelines of these values. But second, we actually think that people find significant meaning in listening. You have to remember, panel, that this is a radically different world where people have always believed in these values from the first place. That's why they actually do find value in listening to what their ancestors believe. Opposition would want you to think it is people today being told tomorrow that they have to listen to everything their ancestors said. No, in that sense, we would say it's true. Many religious people do find so much order and value in the structure. That's why people voluntarily choose to wear hijabs. That's why people voluntarily choose to follow strict religious practices, even if it might come at some personal inconvenience to them. They find meaning in it. They find salvation in that. They view their own self-worth as an extension of that. And I think it is frankly demeaning for second opposition to dismiss that as nonsense. Before I move on to the clash about meaning, I'll take the point.
Yeah, so you can't pick and choose. There are values that are broad-based that are both good and bad. You had to explain why good values don't exist under our side, but bad values do, to make your case exclusive.
Okay, one, we think that individuals want to leave a really good legacy behind. They don't want to be remembered as someone who proliferated hatred, who proliferated violence. That's why values like love your neighbor, be kind to everyone are the kinds of things they promote as a part of this philosophy. But second, it's just true that without this, being moral is incredibly difficult. It is so difficult to make the moral choice in every instance. It's often easy to choose convenience. We want people to have that force that reinforces them to make the right choice in more instances. Second, let's talk about meaning, because we were clear. Your meaning is tied to your self-worth, and in status quo, self-worth is fleeting. There's the crisis where people do not know what their impact on the world is. They do not know amongst the 8 billion people on this planet whether they will ever leave a change behind. What were the responses we heard to this idea down the bench? The first thing we hear at first opposition is, well, capitalism still exists. Obviously, this doesn't engage with the broad parts of our case, which suggests that maybe you're in a capitalist society, but you don't derive your meaning from how much money you earned. You derive it from how you're living in line with the values of your ancestors. The second thing, and these are just a list of responses from second opposition that are just lies, you don't actually need money or privilege to be reassured in your self-worth at all. Blatantly untrue. The vast majority of people feel incredibly bad about the fact that they look around and see people that have nicer things than them, live nicer lives than them. Second, they tell you that people actually don't care about reaching the top because, poor people just don't have dreams and aspirations, that they never want to make it high up the ladder. I think these responses are incredibly unrealistic and devoid of any relation with reality. The final thing they say is, well, people will still spend time with their relatives. Of course. Again, this is yet another assertion from second opposition. Incredibly flippant responses, given we've proven to you down the bench that people don't have the time, and in the kind of society we live today, they're forced to make trade-offs that come at the expense of their family, at the expense of their community. But let's take them at their best. Let's say that maybe people do ascribe some level of meaning on their side of the house. The unique difference is, this is a meaning that gives people a broader purpose. That's to say that you're living the life of your ancestors. You're leaving a real legacy behind. Any of the meaning they do get is fleeting. Any of the meaning they do get depends on your context or where you are. This is one thing that universally persists for all individuals. So just on scale, given it impacts everybody in the world, and also the extent to which it gives them satisfaction and fulfillment, this is independently the round-winning issue. Second, Finally, let's talk
Point of
about social
information.
change. Because the main push we get is, well, these values are very regressive and they're going to cause large degrees of discrimination. But we actually flip this at second proposition to no response, which is to say that many of these values do oppose discrimination. That values like love and kindness are easy justification to take stands for
Point of
queer rights,
information.
for feminism. Values like pursuing what you believe in, working hard, the pursuit of excellence are all things that are likely to be passed down, and we have no reason to suggest that the specific conservative practices, which we've already proved to you are unlikely the ones carried down, undermine that. What then are the responses we heard to this idea? The first thing we heard is, well, a lot of these good ideas will come up anyways. I don't think this engages with the majority of our case, which is to say that it's very difficult to make good decisions in most instances. At the end of the speech, I just want to weigh these two issues, which is to say that a lot of the discrimination they talk about happens anyways. Until the past 50 years, we did live in an incredibly conservative and regressive society across the world. It is only now that we've seen trends of liberalization increasing. There are still other factors like religion. There are still other reasons to discriminate, like feeling like you have a feeling of superiority that still exists on their side of the house that they don't do much to solve to begin with. So it is unclear how much discrimination or how much targeting might actually increase. But what is clear and certain benefit that you should vote on is the idea that people are finally able to find a sense of meaning, that they finally feel like they have a purpose in their life. That's something that Team India wants to protect, and it loses Team Australia the round.
India's strategy is to minimize their own impacts in the way that they are able to get any change. They try to outframe everything we say, but they don't give a single reason why things like homophobia or hating interracial marriage are not also values, why people don't believe things that aren't also true. Because there is a group of people up there above you who is not living your life and not understanding your specific context, but they do hold beliefs that you don't agree with anymore and that you now have to listen to. When you mess up, someone is watching you above you on their side, someone who knows and believes you are a bad, evil person. You internalize that too. They cannot get away with minimizing their own impacts and trying to outframe the bad one. The first way I'm going to win is explain why bad values do persist and why that easily wins us this debate. But second, I'm going to talk about why even if only exclusively good values exist, we are still the ones who win. And first on those bad values, because India only focuses their case on good values, they try to do that as a time thing, try to have this on their ground, but this is a debate about values and desires, and some of those are bad and things some people don't believe in anymore. What do they say on why bad values or things that people don't agree with anymore, that are regressive, aren't passed on? First, they say they adapt well and they are vague. No, they don't. The comparative is things that adapt well, because you learn morals from things like film and media, from scriptures that are constantly re-evaluated like religion, but they just do not change over time on their side, because they ask you to imagine a radically different world, and that radically different world is one where someone learns something from the previous ancestor before them. They give no example of how this is able to change. If every single person is learning what the previous person told them, I'm unclear where the change happened. They need to tell you specifically why that was something that was able to happen.
Point of
Then they say
information.
these are vague, but a lot of these things are preserved really well, and they are not vague. These things are turned over time, and it is really easy to say that you should not marry someone of a different tribe. It is really easy to say that you should not be gay, or that you should suppress any desire you have. That is damning for their side. Then they say that people are able to recognize societal context, so those bad things aren't passed down. But like, why? In this radically different world, I think the person who is your great-great-grandmother, who is up there in the sky, actually does not understand that things change, maybe has never met a queer person. They don't explain why this actually changes. This is a person who is judging you. The people up there have not seen change. But we also give you another line of analysis which gets a very thin response. We tell you that even if they are good values passed on, they are internalized very, very badly. And if people suspect there is something that says they should not do something, for example, they should not be gay, that is something they do believe in. They just tell you that no one is asking you to go overboard. You get to decide what your value is. But no, this person is up there dictating your life, dictating your social standing, dictating who you are as a person. You take that to be absolute. That is incredibly terrifying, because the entire content of your self-worth, something you likely really care about, something that gives you a sense that you deserve to live on the planet, is entirely dependent on that thing. That means people are incredibly likely to feel incredibly scared of overreaching and stepping out of that. But second, we explain that these can be co-opted by bad actors who want you to believe certain things, who are really homophobic. That makes you believe you need to follow
Point
other
of
things.
information.
So maybe no one is asking you to go overboard, but you do go overboard because you think that you need to. That explains then that even if you only got a few situations where someone held onto those terrible beliefs, that is horrible. horrible. It means that you can't do things like come out to your family. You can't divorce your hateful partner. You can't get into a relationship with a person you love. That is the biggest impact in this debate, and one that the response is so incredibly thin. First, because this is massive in your life and your severity. You cannot make decisions that would have been good for you. But second, this is massive on scale, because if you believe their characterization that we live in a world where no one can ever change, where everyone believes this from birth, then obviously that is something that affects many, many, many individuals. That is something that stops you from being able to live out your life. We then explain that that's just stops social progress. Then one response is to say that kindness is something that will make you likely to accept social progress. First, this is contingent on their earlier characterization, which I told you was untrue. But second, that doesn't respond to anything we tell you at first. Or second, because we tell you that people are unlikely to consider other opinions, because you are more beholden to your ancestors than the people around you. That gets no response. That explains uniquely why people are unlikely to accept social change in any situation. But the last thing to say is that we told you this was a principled obligation, that people had a right to control their own lives, that you give no response to this principle. It's independently debate-winning for all the weighing we give you at first, yes.
If your entire family thinks it's a sin to be gay, how are people coming out on your side of the house either? What's the margin here?
Because maybe your family thinks you shouldn't be gay, but you think it's okay. You understand that feeling. You understand that there are other people out there. On your side, your entire self-worth is determined by the people up above, your ancestors who existed many, many years ago, who do not understand that and do not understand that belief. That is independently debate-winning for us. That is the thing that massively on scale affects people's lives on severity, and even if it only was a small number of people who slipped through, that is massive for their lives. That ruins them. Next, I'm going to talk about their path to victory. Why, even if it is only good values that are passed on, this is still bad for your life. Their claim is that you need this to have good values, but capitalism is symmetrical on both sides. They don't explain why it doesn't exist. But second, I just think this argument is an exaggeration. Because yeah, I do not live by this. Probably no one or very few people in this room does. I do not think we are evil people. I think we do have a sense of community. We explain why that's true. First, because often morals serve us as well. Because if I give you a birthday present, I expect one back. That was a nice thing to do, but morals do serve you on the long term. Second, there are just plenty of ways that people receive these morals, but they change over time. They learn from things like film or TV. Because people learn things, they push them out into the world. That is something that is able to change and able to adapt to certain situations. But second, even if you thought people were slightly less moral, they never explain why that is the massive impact in this debate, because the only thing they're able to say is that you don't prioritize individual success, so you are better to the people around you. You prioritize your community. First, they never explain why this is individually a good thing, because the worst actors slip through on both sides. The worst actors who don't have a sense of self-worth and who don't care about things, who are morally corrupt and have no moral compass, still get through it on their side. The difference is the good people who cared about their self-worth and cared about their morals never prioritize success. The bad people were them running the world. But second, we explain that sometimes you do need to put yourself first over your own values, because maybe on their side you never leave your partner because that would disappoint your family. That's really bad for you. You say in abusive situations, we would give people a right to be slightly morally discerning. That is really, really good for them. We explain that community is something that's independently good. It gives you a chance to be with the people around you and love them. Those are the benefits you get. The difference is the way it is enforced on their side is particularly bad. But next then on how people feel, because they just say that current generations need this because social standing is so fleeting and so external. So you just focus on capitalism and how much money you have. First, many of these things aren't arbitrary that they describe. Many people are happier if you do have more friends and you put in the effort to make more friends. But second, in order to get any of this benefit of meaning, you have to follow everything your ancestors say perfectly. And people cannot do this. And when you sit on your deathbed at the end of your life on their side, you focus on the things that you did badly, that your ancestors looked on and said that that gave you no sense of self-worth. People feel much, much worse on their side. But second, we explain to you the unique set of harms that exist on their side. Your happiness is dependent on every single time you mess up. Every single time you have an urge to do something bad. Every single time you make a little mistake, which all of us do every day, that attacks your self-worth as a person. You are incredibly scared to make any mistakes, any issues. Every time you think something bad, you are scared of that. Why then is the fear of messing up much worse than the benefit of hope they might be able to give you? First, we explain that it's a much bigger impact because feeling bad is a lot worse. But second, note that people just focus on the bad that they feel more than the good that they feel. You're likely to be able to feel good from a lot of different external sources, which are probably much bigger, senses of happiness, like they tell you themselves. But when you did something bad and you were focused on that, that was something that deeply messed with your self-worth and your happiness. That means you were just more unhappy on their side. Then they tell you about elders, that these people get to leave behind a legacy, and you can now care about your values and you leave something behind. But this is not a material legacy, because maybe people would be happier if they made an impact in the life that they lived. Maybe too many people do go out of this world without saying, I'm proud of you or I love you, because things like this make them feel like they are able to have control over lives otherwise. They are able to leave a legacy that is independent from them. We would prefer that people did this themselves. At the end of this debate, you should just believe that the bad values that are passed down are the worst things. They ruin people's lives. They're on a massive scale. But second, the good values they pass down are at least very much mitigated. But secondly, they don't explain why that is the most good thing they can bring. We were the ones who made people happier. They could make choices that served them rather than people who existed 100 years ago. So proud to oppose.
First, on the principle. We explain that this is an unjust imposition on one's agency, regardless of the consequentialist outcomes India stands behind. And we know that this isn't analogous to any other good constraints of agency, because this controls the entire way you structure your life. It controls the lens through which you decide your ancestors, or through you decide your actions. And the weighing of this principle was simple, it was debate-winning, it was absolute. Because firstly, in a debate where some good values existed, some bad values existed, human psychology was different for every individual, everyone had different ancestors. This was an incredibly certain harm that cut through human psychology. But secondly, this principle is all-encompassing and absolute. It isn't just an extra harm for us. It is a harm you must not take, regardless of any practical consequences. Because we let people partake in dangerous activities, because we realize people ought make decisions, because they know themselves best, and they live through the consequences of it. Moral violence cuts through every practical harm, because having choices in life is what makes us human. It is what makes us individual. This principle was the most important thing that stood at the end of this debate. Affirmative also never responds to the principle, so you should take our characterization and weighing as true. Next, let's talk about the individual. The first important thing I want to note is that we symmetricize people valuing good values at second, which means that people can find their source of meaning on our side as they do on their side, so all of their benefits in their first argument is completely symmetric. So what you should focus on is our harms. The first and most important and certain claim that we explain is that regardless of whether these values are good or bad, the choice to make them instills anxiety and uncertainty into people when they feel guilty for rebelling, when they do not know what choice to make. And it doesn't matter if these were good or bad values, because you were different to your mother, you had different relationships to her, you have a different personality to her, you grew up in a different world, so her values are not applicable to you, which means there will be a point in your life where you do not know how to follow or match up her values or the values of your ancestors into your daily life. There will be a point in your life where you have to evaluate whether loyalty is actually good for your relationship, and you will have a gut instinct that tells you you shouldn't be loyal, but you will also know that your grandmother and your mother were loyal and it worked out for them, and that causes huge amounts of anxiety in an individual. Secondly, we explain that values are bad, values are regressive, values are sexist, and values are homophobic. And they try to symmetricize the harms of this, and they claim that we don't respond at third affirmative, but the problem is we do, because we explain that you can get away from your family and not feel guilty under our side, but you do feel guilty under their side. We explain that your family is far more accepting under our side, whereas it is far more less accepting under their side, when your family believes that your philosophy should be shaped by those values. The last claim we explain is that good values are not universal, they are bad in extremes, and you should allow individuals to figure out their lives. This team is incredibly paternalistic. They think that individuals cannot or do not have the capacity to find meaning in their lives, but for 2,000 years, we have as humans. For millennia, we have as humans. We have found meaning in art, we have found meaning in interests, we have found meaning in friends, all of which we can control. Maybe you cannot control your economic and social mobility, but you can control whether or not you work hard enough to maybe get a little bit of a better job. This team underestimates the power of humanity, and for that, they must lose. Lastly, I'll talk about social progress. And the key problem with their claim here is that it is extremely circular. Their logic is status quo biased, because maybe now we think that homophobia is unkind, but the problem is back then, people thought it was a sin, so they thought it was bad to be homophobic. So their logic that you want to be kind and therefore you will not be homophobic does not stand. They are trying to co-opt the good parts of the status quo and let themselves have it. That's not how it works. We get the status quo. Our characterization is far more likely, because we explain that people are far likely to have more inertia under their side when people think that an attack to their values is also an attack to their ancestors, when people are empowered by their ancestors' values, and because under our side, people are just far braver to stand out, people are far braver to disagree with their families. And maybe this only sped up social progress by 10 or 20 years, but that impact was huge on scale, on magnitude, so you should let us win the debate on all three fronts.
Thank you very much. And now for the final speech of the round, and in fact the tournament, may we have the proposition reply speaker. Here.
Team Australia hinges their case on these being the most regressive values, but that fundamentally does not engage with the way Seriti is propagated. This is not one-liners and instructions that your ancestor has left behind, but these are values that they tell you to live by. These are values that are positive. These are values that are often vague, and therefore you have the ability to interpret. This is living a good life. This is being honest. This is being integral. At the end of the day, that gave you immense value. Friends and clubs never determined social standing. On their side, they had to deal with the fact that shackles of capitalism made people feel worse about themselves, and it's horrific that they dropped this in their third opposition. I'm in this speech going to talk about how people conceptualize their own identity and how they find meaning and social standing on either side. Because we were clear, Seriti is unique. Because it is a source of thinking about your social standing that you are able to control and interpret. And they can point to alternative sources down the bench in terms of your friends, in terms of your standing or community. But one, those were sources of meaning that were incredibly hard to access given the way the status quo works. The status quo is one where we have an overemphasis on individualism and capitalism that forces you to pursue success and money to be able to gain social standing. And that often takes away from your other communities. But second, even if these other sources existed, it never translated to anything as grand as your purpose in standing. Because hanging out with your friends, as we tell you, is fun in the short term. But when you get home, you feel empty from not being able to access higher social standing or not having a sense of purpose of what your life is based upon. And that is a unique thing that we were able to give people on our side. And I want to weigh this against the claims that they bring you. First, I think this is a clash that is independent of whether these are good values or bad. We've given you reasons down the bench for these are more likely to be values that are good. But even if that is not the case, even if it is imperfect, that doesn't negate the benefits that people are able to derive from it or the value they get from it. And I want you to intuition this. Think about religion. Religion occasionally propagates incredibly conservative values, but people still find incredible solace within it. We understand that this is exclusionary to certain people, but those are people that still have the ability to disagree with the values of their ancestors, because this is a strong belief and there are always people who will be outcast to social norms. Strong doesn't translate to absolute. You can still find alternative communities. But for most people, this was something of incredible value, and this was something that gave their life a purpose that it otherwise lacked. But second, they have a claim on restriction of choice. I think that claim doesn't recognize how this changes the world. Because even if it is the case, this is incredibly restrictive to your choice, people are largely fine with that because this is how they've grown up, this is normalized. The restriction of choice is not something that feels incredibly harmful. In contrast, what they're able to uniquely get is meaning. Third, we think this is something that is uniquely accessible to most people because it is easy to abide by. These are often incredibly vague values. This is a characterization they have not engaged with down the bench. We have no reason why your ancestors are giving you incredibly specific instructions. It is often very hard to do so. They don't want to be contradictory, and they don't want to have values that don't evolve with time. And what that means is it is often really easy for people to stick to these values, even in the instance that you think being imperfect. It is you who gets to interpret it, and therefore you are likely to interpret this in a way that is far more positive. In contrast, their benefit in this debate was one of social change. One, I think there's a benefit that is of far lower margin, because it is true that people are still conservative. It is true that people are still regressive, and that is largely because often you still have conservative values that will be predominant in families and that will still restrict agency for people that they care about. That is a lower margin claim. Second, it is a claim that probably only accesses in the short term, because in the long term, we think the reasons for why we get liberalization are quite distinct to this norm, and we have the ability to be able to adapt. We have the ability to change our understanding of these values and apply them in a way that is more positive. So even if it is the case that this harm occurs for some time, we think this is a harm that we have the ability to correct for going into the long term. But finally, at the end of the day, social change was always going to be speculative. It was always going to be hard for people to contribute to movements, go out of their way to donate. If anything, we thought that was more likely in a world where you told them to abide by positive values that we told you in our second speech. This is a benefit they could not guarantee. What we could guarantee you was this was something that gave people incredible amounts of meaning, and that is why you vote Team India.
Thank you very much. Could we have one more round of applause for our grand finalists?
We congratulate both finalist teams on such an outstanding debate. You have shown skill, depth, and passion, and your performance is a source of pride for your delegation and for all of us. At this moment, the panel of judges will now withdraw to deliberate. We appreciate your patience to wait inside of the room while they make what we know will be a very difficult decision. We are grateful for your presence and participation in this historic edition of the tournament. More than just a competition, WSDC is a space where young people from across the world come together in the pursuit of truth, dialogue, and mutual respect. Thank you for making this vision a reality. Now, to begin the final segment, we once again invite the president of the Panamanian Association of Debate, Mr. Alejandro Espino, to share a few words.
Here we go. Good night, everyone. It fills us with immense joy to have so many incredible people here today, and especially to have you here at the Panama Canal. To us, Panamanians, the canal is more than just a marvel of engineering. It's a living symbol of connection. And tonight, you're part of the symbol of what it means, the bridges cultures, to open doors with the fear of prejudice, and to share the very best of who we are with the world. We are proud of our spirit, a spirit that is warm, hardworking, resilient, and always ready to serve you with a smile. The same spirit is reflected in the work of the Panama Canal Authority. He has not only supported this event, but embraced us with open arms. We want to express our deepest gratitude to the Panama Canal, to its administrator, the vice presidents, to the amazing team that has worked with us the whole week, social responsibility team. You have shown us patience, dedication, and excellences at every step. Your commitment was never just about logistics. It was about creating the best possible experience, representing Panama at its finest, and helping us share our culture in the most genuine way. And that brings me to another thing that we are proud of here in Panama, debate. At Aspade, we believe in the power of words, not just to win arguments, but to build bridges. Our mission, it is to take debate to every corner where it's needed most. Debate is not just for podiums. It's for classrooms, communities, and countries. It teaches us to listen before we speak, to challenge with respect, and to disagree with purpose. Now, I know you might have heard certain things about the Panama Canal, maybe even from the most powerful microphones in the world. But this last week, you have seen it for yourself. You have walked its halls, met its people, heard its stories, not the headlines, but the heart. And I hope that now, when you go back home, you become you become those new connections, not just for debate, but to Panama itself. May you carry with you a piece of our warmth, our pride, and yes, even our weather, hot, which we now consider part of our cultural exchange. In this space where global minds met and great ideas are born, we plant seeds of understanding, of tolerance, and of connections. Seeds that we hope will keep growing whenever you go next. Thank you. Thank you for debating. Thank you for listening. And above all, thank you for being here. Let us keep building bridges, word by word, round by round, story by story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alejandro, for reminding us the lasting impact this tournament has on generations and students worldwide. Next, we are pleased to welcome the person who led the organizational efforts for this edition, with vision, tenacity, and heart. Please welcome the convener of WSDC Panama, Ms. Daniela Noriega.
I'll be a little bit impolite and honest when I tell you that I didn't really want to give this speech. Not because I don't have anything to say, alas, as you know, I'm a yapper, but because I am a little sad and a lot tired. The truth is that I feel immensely responsible for every single person who had even a moment of discomfort or disillusionment, because no part of me feels like standing up here just wrapping it up in a neat little bow. I opened this tournament talking about resilience and hope. And even then, despite knowing that the ground that we were standing on was shaky, I still had no real idea what was coming. What awaited us was harder, more humbling, and more human than I could have ever imagined. And yet, despite it all, I feel so deeply grateful. I've been overwhelmed by the presence, patience, and power of this community. I want to thank the people who didn't walk away when things got hard, to Geneva, a quick, kind problem solver at heart, to Scott, who always had a big hug and a kind word for his check-in, and to Gita for her frankness and her warmth and her support. This has been the hardest event I've ever run. Logistically, emotionally, personally. I felt weary, I felt embarrassed, and I felt worried down to my bones. But I've also felt held by 1,000 small acts of kindness, by notes of encouragement, by people offering grace when I least expected it, and maybe when I felt like I didn't quite deserve it. If I had to leave you with one lesson, it would be this. If I made it through this week, it is because of debate and the person it taught me to be. Debate gave me what I consider the greatest lesson of my life, that your input doesn't quite always match your output. You can prepare endlessly, work tirelessly, and still lose the round. But there's always a next round. And in that round, you have to choose to show up again, fully, anyway. You can't decrease your effort based on your results. And so I hope, between the struggles, that you had fun. I hope you made friends. I hope you learned. I hope, truly, that we managed to keep alive even a piece of the space we wanted to build for you. At the TC meeting, Geneva referred to me as sunny today. And I was caught quite off guard, because I haven't felt particularly sunny or cheery. If I'm being honest, I would spend this entire speech apologizing if I could. But instead, I'm going to do something much harder for me, which is trying to take a moment to appreciate what went well and what was good about this week. I loved seeing how much fun you had at socials. I'm proud that food, always such a point of stress, turned out to be something people enjoyed, and that any mishaps that we had were promptly fixed. I'm thankful for every person who came to me with a concern or a word of support. Thank you for trusting us to try. I am in awe of my team, who've heard me say just one more big push one too many times this week, and still kept going and going and going. I'm thankful to the OA's team at the school, who took our last-minute schedule changes with empathy and grace, to the Canal Authority for a beautiful opening ceremony and a break night I will never forget, to Jason's optimism, Varshini's clear-eyed solutions, to Theo, Chanso, Tamkin, Preya, Andrew, Muku. You carried us. Your brilliance, your consistency, and your presence were a buoy in the storm. To Valeria, Etienne, Aleli, who always had a sweet compliment to hand out, and to care her volunteers with all the care and all the patience. To Eduardo, Alexis, Gino, Ovidio, and Ariel of the Canal for being a highlight in experience, for being patient, effective, and caring. Working alongside the Canal Authority, Administrator Katin, and you all has been a highlight of our event. We are so proud that at a time of constant misinformation, the Canal has opened its doors to dialogue. In a time of polarization, it has opened its home to tolerance and connection. We cannot wait to continue building global bridges with you. I have to give a shout out to the host team for all the weekends and months and years of dreaming and hard work, our powwows and our sparkles, and all the gratitude that allowed us to keep going day after day. And I cannot possibly name them all. Y realmente nunca había dado un discurso donde no nombraba a persona por persona que me había logrado llevar a través de este evento, pero es que no me atrevo a dejar a nadie por fuera, porque realmente tomó una villa. Así que en general, chispitas para todos. Finally, to the World Debate Consulting team, who've ditched our office for 2 entire weeks to be here. I love you. I love that if I have to be a corporate girly, it is at least with you. Yesterday, I ran into the same 3 children riding the elevator. And by the 3rd time that I ran into them, I had to ask. And they told me this, that I now share with you. 1, riding the elevator was apparently the most fun they were having at that moment in time. And number 2, they said it's a great way to meet people. Right? That was also my vibe. And I said, it cannot possibly be that simple. I might be quite past the age where escalators are fun on their own, but their laughter did, in fact, bring me to tears. In a week that's felt so heavy, it was like a single light turning on in the dark. When you're in organizational committee and things don't go your way, when you're the one who carries the complaints, the breakdowns, and the disappointments, it can be hard to see the joy. It can feel like nothing is good enough, and like your best always comes a little too late. But then, someone makes a friend, someone dances, someone laughs, 3 kids ride in an escalator like it's an amusement park ride, and you remember that maybe, despite everything, something did work. Something clicked. Some little part of what we hoped to build, connection, courage, care, actually got through. I'm nowhere near the hard things, but maybe, story by story, memory by memory, I'll be able to see through them. And maybe, if we're lucky, there are enough elevator moments to carry through us all. Thank you so much for your time this week.
Thank you, Daniela, for your leadership and for being the logistical and emotional core of this tournament. Now, we invite Jason Shao and Varshini Venkatesh, key leaders within the WSDC global community, to offer their reflection on this year's tournament.
We've come to the end of 10 days, which I think we can all say sometimes felt like it went by in the flash of an eye, and sometimes like it was a million years. And I think it felt so quickly because of the intensity of WSDC, but slow because of the unforgettable memories that we are left with. Memories of disappointments, our greatest elations, that one speech that you loved giving. Experiences that have developed our resilience, our curiosity, and our growth. And I think that speaks to the core mission of WSDC that unites all of us here today. The core value of education, not just as people who learn about international relations or economics, but as people who continue to develop our character and who we are. Debate is a powerful tool of dialogue, a way for us to all equip ourselves with the ability to make a change in the world in the way that we see fit. But this tournament and this community is so much more than that. It's about the lasting friendships, that odd feeling that you have if you've been in this activity for a long time, and it seems like no matter what country you go to, you have a friend that you can meet for dinner. It's about the sense of service, that community, the feeling that we want to give back and help to develop this community even further and help us all to see the beauty of debate in the future. And in facilitating that, I want to offer thanks to all of the incredible people who have helped to make this possible, including our wonderful TAB team, the volunteers, our DCAs, the board, the Minister of Canal Affairs, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Security, the Minister of Foreign Relations, and the Office of the First Lady. our brilliant organizational committee, including our convener, Danny, and especially to Varshini, someone who has been an incredible force who has helped to make this community so much better. So, what I want to say as a cap is that it has been a great honor for all of us to serve the community and to be part of the enduring legacy of WSDC that goes far beyond just the people standing here today, but will continue to ripple on in the future. So thank you to everybody, and I hope that you've all enjoyed the tournament.
We also welcome Geneva Roy, a valued voice in our community, to share a few words with all of us gathered here today.
Good evening, everyone. Okay. As chair, it is a pleasure to stand here to say some words of thanks on behalf of the Board of Directors. Over the past week, we've seen some extraordinary speeches, some lightning-fast POIs, and enough documents on deep-sea mining to crash Google Drive. But let's be honest, debating competitions are an unexplainable phenomenon. You travel the world, you spend a week arguing with people that you've just met, you stay up till 2 a.m. on a case that you left far too late, only to return home, fail to explain what you've been doing for the last 2 weeks to anyone else, and to begin the process all over again. Yet, here we are, some of us, far too many times to count, and although we continue to deny it, we do really love it. But beyond motions, beyond draws, what makes this competition is what happens outside the debate rounds. The friendships that you make, the conversations that you have, the pins that you exchange, and the feeling that wherever you come from, here you belong. But above all, we've seen a community come together, one that refuses to let what is happening out there stop the conversations from happening in here. So I want to take a moment to thank those who have dedicated the last 2 years to this competition, the immense amount of time, effort, and love that they have given to this community. We won't be able to thank everyone, but these 5 individuals we could not have run this tournament without. Firstly, to the 2 complaints officers, to Scott and Salome. Thank you for always being willing to help, to make this competition inclusive, and to do so with such grace, such American humor, and a genuine desire to make this competition incredible.
Let's go!
Secondly, to our chief adjudicators, Jason and Varshini. I speak from experience when I tell you that being a chief adjudicator is one of the hardest jobs in front of this community. You are the focal point, the name that they recognize, and the one that people often blame when things go wrong. We ask a lot of our chief adjudicators, and we do so because we know they can deliver. And these 2 have not at all failed to live up to that expectation. The hours that they have given here at this tournament and also in advance, they will never get back, but we will always remember. Thank you so much to Jason and Varshini. right, so they're off working. All right, finally then, to Danny, who I'm assuming is here and is not, can please be called. Maybe she's not. All right, we're about to work that out. All right, to Danny, thank you for your incredible work and your incredible leadership of this OrgCom. I know that it hasn't always been easy, and as a community, we haven't always been kind. I know we demand a lot of you, and we expect the utmost. But thank you for sticking with us, for hearing our complaints, our concerns, and for listening and willing to stick with this competition and with this community. You will forever, now officially, be a member of the WSDC community, even if this is your hardest tournament. Thank you incredibly much for all the work and dedication that you have given and the soul that you have put into this competition. This really is your tournament. Thank you very much. Debaters, you have now had the privilege of participating in what I believe is the best debating competition on earth. An experience that will last with you a lifetime, regardless of whether or not at this moment you want it to. An experience that you have earned and one that no one will take away from you. But please realize that whether you lift a trophy this evening, or the only thing you lift at this competition is your team spirit at 2 a.m. in the morning when the Hotel Brinter breaks for the 10th time that evening. That this community is now yours. It doesn't belong to the board, it doesn't belong to the CAP, the TAB team, or even to the host alone. Or it doesn't belong to my favorite document, the WSDC rules. It belongs to you. So please come back as speakers, as judges, or as coaches. Please continue to contribute to this space, because this conversation doesn't end here, and it is so much better with you in it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Geneva. Now, what everyone is expecting, we now move to the award presentation, where we recognize the individuals, delegations that have distinguished themselves throughout this championship. For this, we invite, once again, the CA team to present the awards.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so first we would like to invite all partial double octo finalists to please line up near the entrances of this of the stage. Or someone. Okay. So, starting off, the procedure will be, I will call upon a team, they will come up, they will receive their certificates, and we will congratulate them. Starting first, Team Greece, please. Fotografía, bella fotografía. Next up, we have Team Thailand. Thank you very much. Next up, Team Taiwan. Thank you very much. Next, we have the Republic of Korea. Thank you. Next up, Team Malaysia. Thank you very much. Next up, Team Kenya. Thank you very much. Next up, Team Japan. And last but not least, Team Canada. Let's give a round of applause to all the Octo finalist teams. Okay. All right. Partial double Octo finalists, excuse me. Now are the Octo finalist teams. I will please ask the Octo finalist teams to line up as the previous competitors did. And we will start with Team Mexico. Thank you very much, Team Mexico. Next, we have Team Pakistan. Thank you very much, Team Pakistan. Next up, Czechia. Thank you very much, Team Czechia. Next up, Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you very much, Team New Zealand. Next up, China. Thank you very much, Team China. Next up, Romania. Thank you very much, Team Romania. Next up, England. Thank you very much, Team England. Last but not least, Team Slovenia. Thank you very much, Team Slovenia, and to all our octo finalists. Congratulations. We move on to the teams reaching the quarterfinals, and I will again ask you to line up in the corridors. This clicker requires determination. Okay. Apologies. Okay, South Africa. Congratulations, Team South Africa. Next up, Bangladesh. Thank you very much, Team Bangladesh. Next up, the United States of America. Thank you very much, USA. And last but not least, for quarterfinalist teams, we have Team Bulgaria. And I will also ask Team Bulgaria to stay on the stage because they are the best EFL team of WSDC 2025. Adelina Georgieva Galabinova, Kaloyan Krasimirov Kocev, Valentin Zvetanov Katsarov, and Marin Marinov. Congratulations. And we do have a cup for you. Thank you very much. Next up, our semi-finalists. Let us welcome first Team Singapore. Thank you very much, Team Singapore. Next up, Team Hong Kong. Thank you very much, Team Hong Kong. For this next award, may I please call up Tengku from Indonesia.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Omar. I'm from Indonesia. Long-term friend of Bobby, long-term teammate as well, basically almost everything. So, thank you everyone for ensuring this award lives on. We owe you, Indonesia owes you, EFL and ESL speakers owe you. To those who don't know, Bobby is a figure of hope for us Indonesians. Without Bobby, Indonesia wouldn't be on the map of international debating, quite literally. They were among the first to reach the WDC ESL final. They were our first to break as a judge in international and major tournaments, and the list goes on. What people don't see is how hard Bobby fought for EFL and ESL representation in the global debating stage. They knew how hard it is to even be considered, to be told that we need to speak more clearly, to be told that we could be more efficient in our sentences, never mind the fact that we have to do the double work by translating our thoughts in our mother tongue to English, To be told that examples from our parts of the world are not as persuasive. So Bobby did their work to make sure we get represented, we get judges who will not penalize us, we get the privilege to be heard. To those who don't know, Bobby passed away in 2021 by mere few days before their supposed DCA ship in WSDC that year. There was also the first ACHCOR ship they got through an appointment rather than election, so they were beyond elated to be deemed worthy by the community to represent not just Indonesians, but also EFL and ESL speakers from all over the world. But Alice, Delta variant took them away from all of us. I could not think of better ways to honor the legacy than through this award, on the stage that every school debaters aspire to be on. Indonesia is honored to have our hero being named as the pillar of this award and memory, and may their spirit, work, and legacy live on. With that, I'm honored to make this announcement, and we wholeheartedly congratulate the best ESL team this year, and may your legacy live on more than I'm sure it already does. So congratulations to Team India. Avnia Kaurchada, Uday Virkosla, Veda Karla, Manvir Pratap Ratore, and Arnav Agarwal. Congratulations.
Next up, the Best New Team Award for this year is given to Team Guatemala. Mariana Areano Alvarado, Fátima Sofía Gómez Morales, Ana Sofía Velázquez Peters, Pablo Alberto Lavagnino Sánchez, and José Roberto Kosik Galicia. Congratulations. And I will also ask you to stay on the stage because the Best New Team Speaker Award for this year is presented to Ana Sofía Velázquez Peters from Guatemala.
Okay, we are now moving to Best Speaker Awards, starting with the EFL category, where we award speakers for whom English is a foreign language. We're going to start with the 10 best EFL speaker, which is from Czechia, Christian Czech. Going to the 9th best EFL speaker, which is from Bulgaria, Kaloyan Krasimiro. Next, we have the 8th best EFL speaker. From Bulgaria, Marin Marino. The 7th best EFL speaker from Romania, Sorin Ticlete. Next, we have the 6th best EFL speaker, who is from Czechia, Peter Kosička. Moving to the 5th best EFL speaker from Slovenia, Alex Grof.
All right, moving on with the rest of the EFL Speaker Awards. The 4th best EFL speaker from Japan is Seiji Kanegai. The 3rd best speaker in the EFL division from Team China is Bobby Liu. The 2nd best EFL speaker from Team Romania is David Antoniu Bagasian. And finally, the best speaker in the EFL division of WSDC 2025 from Team Romania is Dragos Cristian Matei.
Right, we now move on to the top 10 English as a second language, ESL speakers. 9th best ESL, tied, from Pakistan, is Ali Nasser. Also tied for 9th best ESL speaker, from New Zealand, is Alan Chen. 8th best ESL speaker from China is Sophia Xiegong. Seventh best ESL speaker from Malaysia is Andrea Ong Lee Wei. Sixth best ESL speaker from Malaysia is Daphne New Daiding.
Hello, we now move on to the 5th best ESL speaker. The 5th best ESL speaker from Team Sri Lanka is Savit Mindit Vijayasundara. The 4th best ESL speaker from Team Pakistan is Muhammad Daniel Hassan. The 3rd best ESL speaker from Team India is Avni Kaurchada. The 2nd best ESL speaker, also from Team India, is Veda Kalra. And finally, the best ESL speaker of WSDC 2025, also from Team India, is Uday.
I have returned. Congratulations to the best ESL speakers. And now we move on to the top 20 speakers of WSDC. Starting with the 20th best speaker in a tie. The first is from Team Australia, Lucas Liu. Tied for 20th best speaker, also from Australia, Harry Tong. Nineteenth best speaker from Team Canada, Lucas Le. 17th best speaker. My bad. 18th best speaker from Malaysia, Daphne Nudainin. If I haven't forgotten how to count again, 17th best speaker now, from New Zealand, Sebastian Hein Scheidrake. Sixteenth best speaker from Team Hong Kong, Advik Sharma.
The 15th best open speaker from Team Sri Lanka, Savith Mindith Wijayasundara. The 14th best open speaker from Team Canada, Jinju Wang. The 13th best open speaker, also from Team Canada, Sarah Lee. The 12th best open speaker from Team Singapore, Zhang Xiaoyu. The 11th best open speaker, also from Team Singapore, Huoshi Chen. I'll also ask the 11th to 20th best open speakers to stand stage, take a photo before walking off.
The 10th best open speaker from the United States, Anuj Lodia. The 9th best speaker from Australia, Maya Garg. The 8th Best Open Speaker from Singapore, Rupa Kinkara. The 7th Best Open Speaker from the United States, Anthony Babu. The 6th Best Open Speaker from Pakistan, Mohammad Daniel Hassan.
Fifth Best Speaker at WSDC from the US, Valerie. At 4th Best from India, Avni. At 3rd, also from India, Veda. At 2nd, also from India, Uday. And last but certainly not least, your best speaker at WSDC 2025 from the US, Kaylin. Congratulations to all the speakers. A large round of applause for them. Thank you, guys. All right, because we have made you wait for so long, I'm going to call up Mubarak to come deliver the OA for the final and the results.
Just don't touch the side now. The left side is recognized as two blind and then it's the result.
Hello, okay. All right, I'm sure when you guys got dressed up, the thing you were most looking forward to was an oral education that didn't give a result while it was talking. But alas, we have tradition, and we must not dishonor our WSDC ancestors. Okay, so 3 things. First, social change, second, on the principle, and thirdly, on contentment. First, on social change. Oh, if this is your first time, we wait till the end to give the results. Okay, social change. One team believes that we need more additional good reminders so that people behave. The other believes that bad values will be taught and so, or will be stuck, and so there will be an impediment to positive social change. The tipping point pushed by both teams are as follows. 1, but other bad things exist in this world which would be an impediment in your world anyway. And then the other team goes, but there are other good things that would also make positive change possible in my world anyway. So, we felt neither of those were particularly convincing in tipping one way or the other. And as a consequence, felt that the original root of this argument is about whether or not we believe good values or bad values are taught in the first place. Now, before we head into that discussion, opposition did have a separate push on the principle of agency. However, we did feel that this was a contingent principle, i.e. that they would have to prove that they would indeed get more choices and agency in their world for that principle to be able to stand. Then, the panel felt that this debate boiled down to the issue of contentment. Under which side are people more content? And there are 3 things we had to consider. First, do we buy the claim that in Proposition's world, we have a world where people have access to an additional meaningful source of meaning that is unique and different from other sorts of meaning by virtue of the motion? Or do we feel that opposition is correct in saying that this is something that would be too strenuous? People would struggle to adhere to the values put forth by their ancestors and therefore not be able to find contentment and meaning. Second, what is the comparative? And in that comparative, do we believe that it is a situation where the overwhelming nature of capitalism means that we have no real choice, that we end up buying into a sense of this capitalist treadmill, essentially, where we never find level of contentment and compare ourselves to things that we cannot achieve and feel incomplete? Or, even if it is fleeting, do we have sufficient choices and sufficient different things that we can adhere to, and do we believe in humanity's ability to continue and succeed and find different sorts of contentment in friends and in other forms of things and identities? Third, is it malleable? Are values sticky? Do we keep on looking to our ancestors in the skies and keep thinking about what they would think of us, and in an attempt not to dishonor them, do we keep on sticking to bad values? Or is it that stories are told to us and our memories are the ones that are sticking with us, and as a consequence, do those things end up meaning that we are able to go ahead and find the better values more consistently as opposed to the negative ones? The panel eventually reached a consensus decision on those issues, and the champions of the World Schools Debate Championships 2025 is the team, drum rolls, is the team in Proposition India. not forgetting the incredible efforts, the runners-up of the competition, Australia.
I'll wait for them to sit down. And with that, we now conclude the World Schools Debating Championships 2025. Thank you all.